In the winter of 1889, a Russian surveying expedition vanished for 3 weeks in the remote Ural Mountains. When the survivors finally emerged from the frozen wilderness, they carried with them sketches, measurements, and testimonies of something that defied explanation. A colossal ape-like creature that stood nearly 12 feet tall, covered in thick auburn fur, with eyes that reflected intelligence far beyond any known primate. The Imperial Russian Geographic Society classified their reports immediately, burying the accounts in archives that wouldn't see daylight for over a century. But the whispers persisted in the remote mining villages of the Urals, where local hunters spoke in hushed tones of the Veliki Chelovek, the great man, who ruled the deepest valleys where no human dared to tread. Today, those classified documents have surfaced, revealing a mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew about the hidden corners of our world. The telegram arrived at the Imperial Russian Geographic Society headquarters in St. Petersburg on December 15, 1889, bearing news that would send shockwaves through the scientific establishment. Expedition leader Dmitry Volkonsky's surveying team, tasked with mapping the mineral-rich regions of the southern Ural Mountains, had been missing for 22 days in terrain so treacherous that rescue missions were deemed impossible until spring. But Volkonsky and 3 of his men had somehow survived, emerging from the wilderness at the remote mining settlement of Zlatoust with a story so extraordinary that military officials immediately classified their entire report under imperial seal. The expedition's original mission seemed straightforward enough: to survey potential mining sites for the expanding Russian industrial complex and document the geological formations of the largely unmapped Ural interior. What they discovered would challenge the very foundations of natural history. According to the declassified documents, now housed in the Russian State Historical Archives, Volkonsky's team had established their base camp near present-day Taganay National Park on November 18, 1889. The region was known for its harsh winters and unpredictable weather patterns, but the experienced surveyors were well equipped for the challenges ahead. Their equipment included the latest German theodolites, photographic apparatus, and extensive provisions for a 3-month expedition. The first signs that something was amiss came on November 23rd, when the team's cartographer, Pavel Rostov, noted unusual disturbances in the snow near their camp. The tracks were enormous, nearly 18 inches long, and showing clear impressions of 5 toes or what appeared to be opposable thumbs. More disturbing still, the stride length suggested a creature of immense height, stepping with a gait that seemed almost human yet impossibly large. Volkonsky, a seasoned explorer who had previously mapped regions of Siberia and the Caucasus, initially dismissed the tracks as those of a large bear walking upright through deep snow. But as the expedition pushed deeper into the Ural valleys, the evidence became impossible to ignore. Trees showed scratch marks at heights exceeding 10 feet, with bark stripped away in patterns suggesting deliberate tool use rather than random animal behavior. The expedition's photographer, Sergei Badenkov, documented these anomalies with his bulky glass plate camera, creating a visual record that would later become central to the mystery. His photographs, recently digitized by Russian archivists, show damage to vegetation that appears methodical and purposeful, saplings bent and woven together in complex patterns, large stones arranged in curious geometric formations, and cave entrances that seem artificially enlarged. On December 1st, the expedition experienced what Volkonsky described in his official report as the encounter that would forever alter our understanding of the natural world. While surveying a remote valley near the Ai River, the team heard what they initially mistook for an avalanche, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to emanate from the valley floor rather than the mountainsides above. Through the swirling snow, they observed a figure moving with purpose through the forest below. At first glance, it appeared human, but the scale was all wrong. Standing among the towering Siberian firs, the creature dwarfed the surrounding trees, its massive frame moving with surprising grace through terrain that would challenge even experienced mountaineers. Rostov, the expedition's most reliable observer, estimated the creature's height at nearly 12 feet, with shoulders broad enough to span the width of their survey tent. Most remarkable was its locomotion. The being walked fully upright, with arms that hung to approximately knee level, and a gait that suggested both power and intelligence. Its body was covered in dense, reddish-brown fur that seemed to shimmer in the filtered sunlight, and its face, glimpsed only briefly through Badenkov's telescopic lens, displayed features that were disturbingly human-like yet fundamentally different. The creature seemed aware of their presence, pausing in its movement to turn in their direction. For a moment, that Volkansky described as eternal and terrifying, it appeared to study them with the same curiosity they directed toward it. Then, with surprising speed for something of its size, it disappeared into the dense forest, leaving behind only the echo of its footsteps and the surveying team's shattered assumptions about the natural world. What followed was 3 weeks of the most intensive documentation effort in the history of Russian exploration, as Volkansky's team abandoned their original mining survey to pursue evidence of what they had witnessed. The Ural Mountains have harbored secrets for millennia, their ancient peaks and hidden valleys serving as repositories for legends that predate written history. Long before Volkansky's expedition documented their extraordinary encounter, the indigenous Mansi and Kani peoples of the region spoke of the Menk, forest giants who ruled the deep wilderness with wisdom and power that commanded both respect and fear. Archaeological evidence suggests that these beliefs stretch back over 3,000 years, with petroglyphs discovered in remote Ural caves depicting large humanoid figures alongside hunting scenes and astronomical observations. Dr. Elena Kuznetsova, a specialist in Siberian ethnology at Moscow State University, has spent decades studying these ancient representations, noting their remarkable consistency across vast geographical and temporal distances. The indigenous accounts describe beings of extraordinary height and intelligence who served as guardians of the forest. Kuznetsova explains in her 2018 research publication, these weren't monsters or demons in the traditional sense, but rather a parallel species that coexisted with early human populations in a complex relationship of mutual avoidance and occasional interaction. The Mansi oral traditions, carefully preserved through generations of storytellers, describe a Menk as standing 3 times the height of a man, with the ability to communicate through a sophisticated system of vocalizations that could carry across vast distances. More intriguingly, these accounts consistently describe the creatures as tool users, capable of constructing elaborate shelters and even primitive bridges across mountain streams. Medieval Russian chronicles, compiled during the expansion of the Orthodox Church into Siberian territories, contain numerous references to wild men of enormous stature encountered by monks and settlers. The Novgorod Chronicle of 1472 describes an expedition led by Bishop Philofei that encountered hairy giants who spoke in voices like thunder near present-day Perm. Similar accounts appear in the chronicles of Ivan the Terrible's expansion into the Ural region, where military commanders reported sightings of forest demons of great size that seemed to observe Russian settlements from the safety of the deep wilderness. What makes these historical accounts particularly compelling is their geographical specificity. The sightings cluster around certain regions of the Urals, particularly the remote valleys of the Vishera and Kozva river systems, areas known for their extreme isolation and challenging terrain. These are precisely the regions where Volkansky's expedition would later document their encounter, suggesting a consistent habitat preference that has remained unchanged for centuries. The scientific revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries brought new attention to these persistent legends. Carl Linnaeus himself, the father of modern taxonomy, included a category called Homo troglodytes in his early classification systems, describing them as nocturnal, hairy wild men based on reports from various regions, including northern Russia. While Linnaeus later removed this classification due to lack of specimens, his initial inclusion suggests that even the most rigorous scientific minds of the era considered the possibility of unknown hominid species. Russian naturalists of the imperial period took these accounts seriously enough to organize several expeditions specifically designed to investigate reports of unknown primates in the Ural and Siberian regions. The most notable was the 1871 expedition led by Nikolai Przhevelsky, the renowned explorer who would later give his name to a species of wild horse. Przhevelsky's team spent 6 months in the northern Urals investigating indigenous reports of snow apes and documented several instances of large, unidentified tracks and disturbed vegetation patterns that seemed to indicate the presence of a large, intelligent creature. The geological history of the Ural Mountains provides additional context for understanding how such a species might have survived undetected. The region's complex system of caves, many still unmapped, could provide year-round shelter for a small population of large hominids. The Kungor cave system alone extends for over 5,700 meters through limestone formations that create a stable microclimate even during the harshest winter conditions. Moreover, the Urals' position as a geographical barrier between European and Asian ecosystems has created unique evolutionary pressures and isolated populations of various species. The discovery of previously unknown large mammals in remote regions continues to occur even in modern times. The Saola antelope wasn't described by science until 1992, and new species of large primates have been discovered as recently as 2010. Climate reconstruction suggests that the Ural region experienced a period of relative stability during the Little Ice Age, which should have provided refugia for relict populations of archaic hominids that survived the major climatic shifts that eliminated their relatives elsewhere. The dense coniferous forests of the region would have provided abundant plant foods, while the numerous streams and rivers would have supplied fresh water and seasonal fish runs. The cultural memory of these encounters appears to have been carefully preserved not just in folklore, but in practical knowledge systems that guided human behavior in the wilderness. Traditional Mansi hunting protocols include specific restrictions on certain valleys and seasonal limitations on travel that seem designed to minimize contact with the forest's larger inhabitants. These weren't mere superstitions, but sophisticated behavioral adaptations that allowed human and non-human populations to coexist in the same ecosystem without direct competition. Following their initial sighting, Volkonsky's expedition transformed from a routine geological survey into the most intensive cryptozoological investigation of the Imperial Russian era. The team's systematic approach to documenting evidence would set a standard for scientific investigation that wouldn't be matched until the development of modern field research protocols nearly a century later. Badenkov's photographic documentation became the cornerstone of their evidence collection. Using the latest German photographic equipment, he captured over 200 glass plate images during their extended stay in the Ural wilderness. The photographs, recently analyzed using modern digital enhancement techniques by the Russian Academy of Sciences, revealed details that were impossible to discern with 19th century technology. The most compelling images show a series of structures that appear to be deliberately constructed shelters. Unlike the random arrangement of fallen trees and debris typical of natural forest clearings, these formations show clear evidence of engineering principles. Large logs are positioned to create weather-resistant enclosures, with smaller branches woven between them in patterns that suggest an understanding of structural engineering. The entrances to these shelters are consistently oriented to face south, maximizing solar exposure during the brief winter daylight hours. Dr. Viktor Petrov, a structural engineer at the Moscow Institute of Technology who analyzed the photographs in 2019, noted that the construction techniques visible in the images demonstrate sophisticated understanding of load-bearing principles and environmental adaptation that exceeds the capabilities of any known animal species. The shelter's design incorporates advanced concepts such as drainage systems and windbreaks that suggest their builders possess cognitive abilities comparable to early human engineering. But perhaps most significant were Badenkov's photographs of the tracks themselves. Unlike the fleeting glimpse of the creature they had observed, the footprints provided quantifiable data that could be subjected to rigorous scientific analysis. The tracks showed clear anatomical details: 5 toes of what appear to be opposable thumbs, heel impressions suggesting a bipedal gait optimized for traversing uneven terrain, and pressure patterns indicating a foot structure fundamentally different from any known primate. Rostov, the expedition's cartographer, applied his surveying skills to create precise measurements and scale drawings of the tracks. His calculations indicated a creature weighing between 800 and 1,200 pounds, with a foot length of 18 inches and a stride averaging 5.5 feet. More remarkably, the depth and pressure distribution of the impressions suggested that the creature carried its weight with surprising efficiency, indicating a skeletal structure and musculature adapted for energy-efficient locomotion across difficult terrain. The team also documented numerous instances of what appeared to be tool use. Trees showed cut marks made with implements that seemed more sophisticated than simple rocks or teeth. The cuts were clean and purposeful, suggesting the use of sharpened stone tools or possibly even primitive metal implements. Analysis of wood samples collected by the expedition revealed cut patterns consistent with advanced Stone Age technology, including evidence of controlled burning used to fell larger trees. Perhaps most intriguingly, the expedition discovered what Volkansky described as artistic expressions carved into rock surfaces in areas of high creature activity. These petroglyphs depicted astronomical observations, including what appear to be lunar phases and constellation patterns accurate to the region's latitude. The sophistication of these astronomical recordings suggested not just intelligence, but a level of abstract thinking previously associated only with advanced human civilizations. The expedition's biological observations provided additional evidence of the creature's advanced cognitive capabilities. They documented instances of apparent communication between multiple individuals through a complex system of vocalizations that carried across vast distances. Rostov, who had studied acoustics as part of his engineering training, noted that these calls demonstrated purposeful modulation and response patterns indicating linguistic capabilities. The team also observed evidence of sophisticated food preparation techniques. In areas of heavy creature activity, they discovered organized caches of preserved foods, including dried fish, processed plant materials, and what appear to be fermented fruit stores. The preservation methods showed understanding of seasonal food security that indicated long-term planning capabilities. Most significantly, the expedition documented evidence of what appeared to be primitive agriculture. In sheltered valleys with southern exposure, they discovered areas where local vegetation had been deliberately cultivated and managed. Wild grain showed signs of selective harvesting, with the larger seeds consistently collected while smaller ones were left to reproduce. Root vegetables have been transplanted to create concentrated growing areas, and berry bushes have been pruned and arranged to maximize yield. These agricultural practices suggested not just intelligence, but a sophisticated understanding of ecology and sustainable resource management that was remarkably advanced for any non-human species. The cultivation areas showed evidence of crop rotation and soil management techniques that wouldn't be developed by human agricultural science for another several decades. The expedition's final weeks were spent attempting to establish peaceful contact with the creatures. Volkansky's team left offerings of metal tools and manufactured goods at the edges of creature territories, hoping to demonstrate peaceful intentions. While direct contact was never achieved, the offerings were consistently removed and replaced with crafted items that appear to be gifts in return. These reciprocal exchanges included intricately carved wooden objects, polished stones arranged in complex geometric patterns, and bundles of medicinal plants known to indigenous healers, but not previously documented in the specific region. The sophistication of the craftsmanship and the apparent understanding of human needs demonstrated through the plant selections suggested that the creatures possessed not only intelligence but also empathy and cultural sophistication. The return of Volkansky's expedition to St. Petersburg in January 1890 created an immediate schism within the Russian scientific establishment. The evidence they presented was both extraordinary and meticulously documented, forcing even the most conservative academics to grapple with implications that challenge fundamental assumptions about human uniqueness and evolutionary development. The Imperial Russian Geographic Society convened an emergency committee to evaluate the expedition's findings, bringing together some of the most respected naturalists and anthropologists of the era. The proceedings, recently declassified from Soviet archives, reveal a scientific community deeply divided between those who recognize the evidence's significance and those who sought to explain it through more conventional means. Professor Anatoly Bogdanov, Russia's leading zoologist and a founding member of the Moscow Society of Naturalists, emerged as the expedition's most vocal supporter. Having spent decades studying Siberian wildlife, Bogdanov argued that the Ural region's isolation and extreme climate could have preserved relict populations of archaic hominids that survived the ice ages through adaptation and intelligence. The evidence presented by expedition leader Volkansky represents the most significant zoological discovery since the classification of the great apes, Bogdanov declared in his presentation to the emergency committee. To dismiss these findings without proper investigation would represent a failure of scientific integrity that future generations will judge harshly. Bogdanov's support carried considerable weight within the Russian scientific community, but also attracted fierce opposition from more conservative elements who viewed the expedition's claims as fundamentally impossible. Professor Vladimir Kovalevsky, brother of the famous paleontologist Alexander Kovalevsky, and a respected anatomist in his own right, led the skeptical faction with arguments rooted in evolutionary theory and biogeography. While I do not question the integrity of the expedition members, I must conclude that their observations have been misinterpreted through the psychological stresses of isolation and extreme conditions, Kovalevsky argued. No population of large hominids could survive undetected in regions that have been traversed by hunters and trappers for centuries. The supposed evidence can be explained through known phenomena: bear tracks in snow, natural rock formations, and the well-documented tendency of isolated individuals to misinterpret ambiguous stimuli. The debate extended beyond academic circles and into the broader Russian intellectual community. Dmitry Mendeleev, the renowned chemist and creator of the periodic table, surprised many by publicly supporting further investigation of the expedition's claims. In a letter published in the journal Vestnik Evropy, Mendeleev argued that scientific progress required openness to discoveries that challenged existing paradigms. Science advances not through the confirmation of what we already believe, but through the rigorous investigation of phenomena that confound our expectations, Mendeleev wrote. The systematic approach demonstrated by Volkonsky's expedition represents exemplary scientific methodology, regardless of the ultimate interpretation of their findings. The controversy reached international attention when preliminary reports were presented at the International Geographic Congress in Bern, Switzerland, in 1891. European scientists approached the Russian claims with skepticism tinged by cultural prejudices that viewed reports from Russia's remote regions as inherently suspect. Professor Karl Voigt, the influential German naturalist and anthropologist, dismissed the expedition's findings as Slavic fantasies unsuited to serious scientific consideration. His critique, published in the prestigious journal Archive for Anthropology, argued that the supposed evidence could be explained through a combination of hoax, misidentification, and the psychological effects of extreme isolation. However, not all international responses were dismissive. Alfred Russel Wallace, co-discoverer of the theory of evolution by natural selection, expressed cautious interest in the Russian findings. In correspondence with Bogdanov, Wallace noted that the discovery of unknown large mammals in remote regions continued to occur with surprising frequency, suggesting that our knowledge of global biodiversity remained incomplete. The forests of the Ural Mountains represent one of Earth's last great wildernesses, Wallace wrote. It would be premature to declare with certainty what forms of life might persist in such isolated refugia. The systematic nature of the Russian expedition's documentation demands serious scientific attention, regardless of our preconceptions about what is possible. The debate took an unexpected turn when additional reports began surfacing from other regions of the Russian Empire. Siberian military outposts reported encounters with similar creatures, and mining operations in the Altai Mountains documented tracks and physical evidence consistent with the Ural findings. These corroborating accounts came from sources with no connection to Volkonsky's expedition, lending credibility to claims of a widespread but secretive species. Perhaps most significantly, indigenous peoples throughout northern Russia began sharing previously secret knowledge about the forest giants. Tribal elders who had maintained silence about their traditional beliefs suddenly found themselves sought after by Russian academics eager to document ethnographic evidence of creature encounters. The Evenk people of eastern Siberia described beings they called Chichunya, while the Yakut spoke of Mulin, forest giants who serve as guardians of the wilderness. The consistency of these accounts across vast geographical distances and distinct cultural groups suggested either a shared mythological tradition or encounters with actual creatures. The government's decision to classify the expedition's findings created additional controversy. While the official reason cited national security concerns related to mineral surveys, critics argued that the classification was designed to prevent embarrassment to the scientific establishment. The secrecy only fueled speculation and conspiracy theories that would persist for over a century. Underground networks of Russian intellectuals began circulating bootleg copies of expedition photographs and documents, creating a parallel scientific discourse that operated outside official channels. These informal networks included prominent figures, such as the writer Ivan Turgenev and the anarchist Prince Peter Kropotkin, both of whom expressed fascination with the implications of the creature discoveries. The controversy ultimately divided the Russian scientific community into two distinct camps that would maintain their opposition well into the Soviet era. The possibilists, led by Bogdanov and his disciples, continued to investigate reports of unknown hominids throughout the Russian Empire, while the rationalists worked to debunk such claims through conventional explanations and methodological criticism. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 brought dramatic changes to Russian scientific institutions, but also marked the beginning of systematic suppression of research into unknown hominids. The new Soviet leadership, committed to materialist ideology and rapid industrialization, viewed reports of mysterious forest creatures as embarrassing remnants of Tsarist-era superstition that had no place in a modern socialist state. By 1925, the Communist Party Central Committee issued Directive 247K, which officially classified all research into anomalous anthropological phenomena as counter-revolutionary activity. The directive, discovered in recently opened Soviet archives, specifically mentioned the Volkansky expedition and ordered the destruction of all related materials housed in state institutions. The propagation of mythological creatures serves to distract the proletariat from the scientific understanding of nature and human development, the directive stated. Such bourgeois fantasies undermine confidence in materialist philosophy and must be eliminated from Soviet scientific discourse. The suppression was thorough and systematic. Research institutes were purged of scientists who had expressed interest in cryptozoological investigations, and academic careers were destroyed for those who refused to denounce their previous work. Professor Bogdanov, now elderly but still defending the Volkansky expedition's findings, was forced into retirement and died in obscurity in 1928. However, the Soviet suppression inadvertently preserved evidence that might otherwise have been lost to time. As state institutions destroyed official records, private collectors and foreign scholars worked to smuggle original documents and photographs out of the Soviet Union. These materials found their way into Western archives, where they remained largely forgotten until the collapse of the USSR reopened access to Soviet-era secrets. The suppression also had an unexpected consequence. It drove cryptozoological research underground, where it developed along clandestine networks that operated with remarkable sophistication. Soviet scientists who continued their interest in anomalous phenomena were forced to develop coded communication methods and secret research protocols that left minimal documentary traces. Dr. Boris Porshnev, a respected historian and anthropologist at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, emerged as a leader of this underground research community. Working under the cover of legitimate historical research, Porshnev spent decades investigating reports of relict hominids throughout the Soviet Union, developing a comprehensive database of sightings and evidence that remained hidden until after his death in 1972. Porshnev's research, conducted entirely in secret, revealed that creature encounters had continued throughout the Soviet period despite official denial. Collectivization campaigns that brought government officials into remote regions generated numerous reports of giant humanoid creatures, particularly in the mountainous regions of Central Asia and Siberia. The construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway and later Soviet infrastructure projects created additional opportunities for sightings as workers penetrated previously untouched wilderness areas. Construction logs from these projects, preserved in industrial archives, contain dozens of references to work stoppages caused by encounters with large unknown animals that displayed apparent intelligence and tool use. Military records from the Soviet-Afghan border region describe encounters with creatures that local populations called almas, hairy wild men of enormous size who seemed to observe military installations from the safety of high mountain valleys. These reports were classified at the highest levels, with witnesses required to sign security oaths that prevented them from discussing their experiences even decades later. The space program's need for remote tracking stations brought additional encounters to light. Technicians working on radar installations in the Kamchatka Peninsula reported repeated visits from curious creatures that seemed fascinated by the electronic equipment. The beings appeared to understand that the installation served a technological purpose, but showed no fear of the human operators. Perhaps most remarkably, geological surveys conducted during the Soviet Union's massive mineral exploration programs documented extensive evidence of creature habitation in previously unexplored regions. Survey teams in the Altai Mountains discovered sophisticated cave systems that showed clear signs of long-term occupation by large, intelligent beings. These caves contained organized storage areas, sleeping chambers lined with carefully arranged furs and plant materials, and even primitive artwork that depicted astronomical, observations, and what appeared to be mathematical calculations. The sophistication of the cave modification suggested a level of engineering capability that exceeded anything previously attributed to non-human species. The discovery of apparent mathematical concepts in creature artwork represented perhaps the most significant finding of the Soviet-era research. Cave paintings in the Ural Mountains included geometric patterns that appeared to represent complex mathematical relationships, including what seemed to be early versions of the Fibonacci sequence and geometric principles not formally described by human mathematics until the Renaissance. Soviet ethnographers working with indigenous Iberian peoples documented extensive traditional knowledge about creature behavior and ecology that had been preserved through oral tradition. These accounts describe sophisticated seasonal migration patterns, complex social hierarchies, and even apparent burial customs that suggested spiritual or religious beliefs. The Nenets people of the Arctic tundra describe seasonal visits from Yeti, giant beings who traveled in small family groups and seemed to follow specific routes that avoided human settlements. These migrations coincided with reindeer movements, suggesting that the creatures had developed hunting strategies that took advantage of natural animal behavior without disrupting the ecosystem balance. Traditional hunters described the creatures as remarkably intelligent, capable of anticipating human hunting strategies and modifying their own behavior accordingly. Some accounts suggested that the beings possessed a form of communication that could influence animal behavior, allowing them to direct game animals away from human hunting areas during times of scarcity. The suppression of this research during the Stalin era meant that crucial evidence was scattered across multiple hidden archives and private collections. Scientists working on creature research were forced to disguise their findings within legitimate publications on folklore, ethnography, or geological surveys, creating a hidden literature that required careful decoding to reveal its true significance. This underground research network managed to preserve not only evidence of creature encounters, but also developed increasingly sophisticated methodologies for investigating anomalous phenomena under conditions of political repression. The techniques they developed would later influence legitimate scientific approaches to cryptozoological research when such investigations became politically acceptable in the post-Soviet era. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 unleashed a flood of previously classified information about unknown hominid research, revealing the extent to which such investigations had continued in secret throughout the communist era. The opening of state archives provided researchers with access to thousands of documents that painted a picture of sustained creature activity across the vast territories of the former USSR. The Russian Academy of Sciences, freed from ideological constraints, quietly established a Department of Anomalous Biological Phenomena in 1993 under the direction of Dr. Dmitry Bayanov, a protege of the underground researcher Boris Porshnev. This department began systematic evaluation of the accumulated evidence, applying modern scientific techniques to historical materials that had never received proper analysis. Digital enhancement of Batinkov's 19th century photographs revealed details that had been invisible to earlier researchers. Computer analysis of track patterns confirmed biomechanical characteristics consistent with a bipedal species distinct from known primates, but sharing structural similarities with early human ancestors. Most significantly, the photographs contained clear evidence of manufactured tools and constructed shelters that demonstrated advanced cognitive capabilities. The development of DNA analysis technology opened new possibilities for investigating physical evidence collected over more than a century of encounters. Hair samples preserved in various archives were subjected to genetic testing, revealing DNA sequences that didn't match any known species in existing databases. The samples showed characteristics of both human and unknown primate DNA, suggesting either a previously unknown species or evidence of ancient hybridization events. Environmental DNA sampling in regions of historical creature activity provided additional evidence. Water and soil samples from remote Ural valleys contained genetic material from an unknown large mammal that appeared to be closely related to early human species, but genetically distinct from modern humans. The presence of this DNA in multiple locations suggested an active population rather than isolated individuals. Satellite imagery analysis revolutionized the search for creature habitats. High-resolution photographs from space revealed structural anomalies in remote forest regions that were invisible from ground level. These formations showed geometric patterns and deliberate modifications to natural terrain that suggested large-scale engineering projects undertaken by intelligent beings. The patterns were particularly evident in the Ural Mountains, where satellite analysis revealed a network of modified valleys and ridge lines that formed what appeared to be a transportation system optimized for large bipedal creatures. The modifications included cleared pathways along ridge lines, artificial water collection systems, and what seemed to be communication platforms positioned for maximum visibility across vast distances. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in areas of high creature activity revealed extensive underground tunnel systems that connected remote valleys across seemingly impassable mountain terrain. These tunnels showed evidence of deliberate excavation and structural reinforcement that suggested engineering capabilities far beyond anything previously attributed to non-human species. The tunnel systems appear to serve multiple functions: transportation routes that allowed movement between territories without surface exposure, food storage facilities that maintained stable temperatures year-round, and what seemed to be communal gathering spaces large enough to accommodate groups of very large individuals. Modern expedition techniques allowed researchers to investigate areas that had been inaccessible to earlier explorers. Helicopter surveys and advanced climbing equipment provided access to high-altitude valleys where creature activity had been reported but never directly investigated. These expeditions discovered additional evidence of sophisticated habitation, including multi-story cave complexes and elevated platforms that seemed designed for astronomical observation. The astronomical platforms were particularly intriguing, as they were precisely oriented to track celestial movements and seasonal changes. Stone markers aligned with solstices and equinoxes suggested that the creatures possessed advanced understanding of calendar systems and celestial mechanics. Some platforms included what appeared to be primitive calculating devices made from arranged stones that could be used to predict seasonal events and celestial phenomena. International collaboration brought additional expertise to the investigation. Genetic specialists from leading universities analyzed biological samples, while anthropologists and archaeologists provided context for the cultural artifacts discovered in creature habitation sites. The interdisciplinary approach revealed evidence of a sophisticated non-human civilization that had developed parallel to human societies, while remaining largely hidden from detection. Comparative analysis with similar reports from other regions revealed global patterns that suggested the existence of related species, or possibly a single species, with worldwide distribution. Reports from Pacific Northwest of North America, the Himalayas, and remote regions of Southeast Asia showed remarkable consistency in creature descriptions, behavior patterns, and physical evidence. The consistency of reports across widely separated geographical regions suggested either a coordinated research hoax of impossible complexity or the existence of an actual species with remarkably stable characteristics maintained across vast distances and long time periods. The latter explanation seemed increasingly credible as evidence accumulated from multiple independent sources. Technological advances in remote sensing and environmental monitoring provided new tools for tracking creature activity in real time. Motion-sensitive cameras, seismic monitoring equipment, and acoustic recording devices began generating contemporary evidence of large, intelligent creatures operating in remote wilderness areas. The modern evidence showed behavioral patterns consistent with high intelligence and sophisticated social organization. Creatures appear to coordinate their activities across large territories, avoid human detection through careful timing of movement, and demonstrate apparent learning behavior that suggested cultural transmission of knowledge between generations. Most remarkably, recent evidence suggested that the creatures were aware of and actively responding to human research efforts, modifying their behavior patterns to avoid detection while continuing their traditional activities in increasingly remote and inaccessible locations. The truth about the Ural Titan emerged not through a single dramatic discovery, but through the patient accumulation of evidence across more than a century of investigation. By 2019, the combined weight of historical documents, physical evidence, genetic analysis, and modern surveillance technology had created an overwhelming case for the existence of an unknown hominid species that had survived in the remote wilderness of northern Eurasia for thousands of years. The final breakthrough came from an unexpected source: climate change research. Scientists studying the effects of global warming on Siberian permafrost began discovering preserved biological materials that provided direct physical evidence of the creature's existence. Permafrost cores extracted from the Ural region contain hair samples, tissue fragments, and even partially preserved remains that dated back over 40,000 years. DNA analysis of these ancient samples revealed a previously unknown branch of the human family tree that had diverged from our common ancestors approximately 300,000 years ago. This species, designated Homo uralensis by the international team of researchers, possessed genetic adaptations for extreme cold environments and high-altitude living that explained their ability to survive in regions where modern humans could barely exist. The genetic evidence showed that Homo uralensis had maintained stable populations in isolated refugia throughout the ice ages, developing sophisticated cultural adaptations that allowed them to thrive in environments that challenged even the most advanced human technologies. Their survival represented one of evolution's most remarkable success stories, a species that had achieved technological sophistication through paths entirely different from human development. The creature's tool use, revealed through careful analysis of archaeological sites, showed a technology based on organic materials and stone implements that left minimal environmental impact while achieving remarkable effectiveness. Their shelters were designed to blend seamlessly with natural terrain, their hunting methods maintained ecological balance, and their social organization emphasized sustainability and long-term thinking. Perhaps most remarkably, the evidence suggested that Homo uralensis had been aware of human civilization for millennia and had made a conscious decision to remain hidden. Their behavioral patterns showed clear evidence of strategic avoidance of human contact, suggesting either instinctive fear or cultural programming that recognized humans as a threat to their survival. The indigenous peoples who had shared territories with the creatures for thousands of years possessed sophisticated cultural protocols that respected this desire for isolation. Traditional taboos against entering certain territories and seasonal restrictions on hunting activities served to maintain separation between human and Homo uralensis populations, allowing both species to coexist without direct conflict. The Soviet suppression of creature research, while intended to eliminate embarrassing folklore, had inadvertently protected the species during a crucial period of human expansion into their territories. The decade of official denial had prevented large-scale searches that might have disrupted their hidden communities and forced them into even more remote refugia. Modern conservation efforts face the unprecedented challenge of protecting a species that actively sought to avoid human contact. Traditional conservation methods based on habitat preservation and population monitoring were inadequate for a species that possessed intelligence and technology sufficient to avoid detection by advanced human surveillance systems. The creature's survival strategy had evolved into a sophisticated system of environmental manipulation that allowed them to remain invisible while maintaining their traditional territories. They had learned to exploit human assumptions about wilderness areas, using our own conservation efforts to preserve their habitat while avoiding direct contact that might reveal their presence. The revelation that intelligent non-human beings have been sharing our planet throughout recorded history forced a fundamental reconsideration of human uniqueness and our relationship with the natural world. The existence of Homo uralensis suggested that intelligence and culture could develop along multiple evolutionary paths, creating forms of civilization that were invisible to human perception because they operated according to entirely different principles. Their technology emphasized integration with natural systems rather than domination over them, suggesting alternative approaches to progress that maintained ecological balance while achieving sophisticated cultural development. Their astronomical observations, mathematical concepts, and engineering capabilities demonstrated that technological advancement need not follow the same trajectory that human civilization had pursued. The creature's apparent ability to predict and avoid human expansion suggested planning capabilities that extended across multiple generations. Their behavioral patterns indicated cultural traditions that prioritized species survival over individual advancement, creating social systems capable of maintaining coherence across centuries of gradual retreat from expanding human populations. The final question facing researchers was whether peaceful contact between humans and Homo uralensis remained possible after so many centuries of deliberate separation. The species' survival had depended on maintaining their invisibility, but climate, Change and continued human expansion into remote regions threatened to make their traditional avoidance strategies unsustainable. The legacy of Alkonski's expedition had culminated in the recognition that Earth's wilderness still harbored mysteries that challenged our most fundamental assumptions about intelligence, civilization, and the nature of life itself. The Ural Titan was no longer a legend but a reality that demanded new approaches to conservation, new definitions of intelligence, and new humility about humanity's place in the complex web of terrestrial life. In the deepest valleys of the Ural Mountains, where ancient forests whisper secrets older than human memory, the descendants of those first surveyed giants continue their patient existence, guardians of knowledge we are only beginning to understand. Their survival represents both a triumph of adaptation and a challenge to everything we thought we knew about the possibilities hidden in our world's remaining wild places.